Hello there. Welcome to Reading for Your Health with Jared Garrett. Who's Jared Garrett? I am Jared Garrett. Welcome to this wonderful video, pre-recorded for your benefit. I hope you are able to gain value from it. I will not be offended, nor will I be aware if you play this at 1.5, 2 times speed. I do tend to talk fast sometimes when I get really excited, so I'll just do my best to keep the craziness down and under control. We'll probably be about 35 or 40 minutes or so for this presentation. I want to make sure you've got plenty of time to ask some questions when they make this available, and I'm able to answer questions, to interact with you. Maybe we can even shoot some ideas at each other. Some ideas, yeah. So I'm glad that we can do this. Jared Garrett, who am I? I'm a writer, I'm a lifelong reader, and I want to just start off with my own little story about why I'm the one doing this. Well, because I love reading, of course, many of us do, but actually reading has made a significant difference in my life. I had a very unusual childhood, and a lot of people can say they had an unusual childhood. It's true. And it's not a competition. I grew up in a cult commune that splintered off of Scientology. I escaped when I was 17 in the 90s, very early 90s. I'm not that young. One little aspect of that is that I didn't have parents really raising me at all. Not at all. There's no really there. I was raised by people who kind of didn't really care about kids. I was raised with about 30 other kids. And so there was a lot of neglect and a lot of mistrust, and I never really felt like there was a safe place for me, and so I felt like I was the enemy. It wasn't a good situation. There was abuse, all kinds of abuse, emotional, physical, and that wasn't great. So I tell you that because when I turned about age 12, but before I turned 12, I guess between 11 and 12, I found out that the Oak Lawn branch of the Dallas Public Library System, which is where all the kids were being raised in that branch of the cult. The Oak Lawn branch of the Dallas Library System was just a couple mile bike ride from the house that I lived in. Not even probably 2, it was probably about 1 and a bit. I should check into that sometime. And so I started reading a lot of books. I already read a lot by that time, but I actually ended up reading every fantasy book they had there. And every time they got a new one, I would just devour it. So I read, the Dragonlance books, Forgotten Realms books, and Icewind Dale trilogy, my goodness, blew my mind. R.A. Salvatore is one of my heroes. Being able to meet him a couple times now has been what a wonderful privilege. Mercedes Lackey books, you guys know these titles and these names, right? Mercedes Lackey, she's a goddess. Having her hold one of my books about a couple years ago was amazing. Anyway, I read all these books, and then I also read every other novel that I could find, pretty much. I really liked the science fiction and the fantasy. I loved the thrillers and the espionage and all that stuff. And I actually read a bunch of romance books too. You would think that I'd write better romances, but I don't. That's okay. I do okay with romance. I'm going to move this a little closer for better hearing. So, it is not an exaggeration to say that those books and that experience of being able to go there maybe didn't quite save my life, but it saved large aspects of my life. Certainly my overall sanity. It also gave me something to focus on and do, but also it helped me create a worldview that I still have. I read books about heroes, about people fighting for good, fighting for what they believed in. And so here I am wanting to do the same thing. I grew up believing in true love, and guess what? I married my true love. She's fantastic. I grew up seeing, how families could overcome all kinds of, challenges and trials, and we do that too, my family and I. It's a wonderful thing, and I am absolutely a hopeful romantic because of the books that I read. I love books. Reading absolutely made a huge difference for me. And it certainly doesn't hurt that reading everything that we're going to talk about today, particularly about mental health as well as development, I'm sure that I benefited from that. So it would be impossible for me to quantify the number of books, but it was definitely thousands. Okay. Reading for Your Health with Jared Garrett. That's me. Let's go into a little bit of a presentation about this that I think will kind of give us a quick encapsulation of what we're going to talk about, just a surface level though. And then at that point you could take off because you'll kind of see the surface global ideas of what I want to talk about. And if you want to stick around for more kind of the details, the in-depth stuff, stick around after the video, okay? So here we go. And you'll see me throughout.
I often get asked, why should I read more? Why would I bother reading a book when I can just watch a video summary of it? It's true, you can save some time this way, and there is nothing wrong with that. However, reading is to the mind what exercise is to the body, and you can't train your body by just watching YouTube videos. So let's get straight to the facts. Reading improves your focus and concentration. Reading, much like running or listening to music, can be a form of meditation. With all the distractions nowadays, people have really big problems with concentrating. Don't be one of them. In a single 5-minute span, the average person will divide their time between working on a task, checking email, chatting with a couple of people and using their smartphone. This type of behavior causes stress levels to rise and lowers our productivity. When you read a book, all your attention is focused on the story. The rest of the world is closed off and you immerse yourself in every fine detail you're absorbing. Try reading for 15 to 20 minutes before work and you'll be surprised at how much more focused you are once you get to the office. It's also a great relaxation technique. Have you ever felt so tense to the point you dreamt of escaping your life for a while? Surprise! You actually can. You don't need a plane ticket to the other side of the globe. A great book can take you all the way to another dimension. Many people overthink their problems when all they need is a break, so that they could go back to searching for a solution with a clear, relaxed mind. So you're stressed out? Then pick up the book. Research conducted in 2009 showed that reading is the most effective way to overcome stress, beating out old favorites such as listening to music, enjoying a cup of tea or coffee, or even taking a walk. Measured by evaluating heart rate and muscle tension, it took the study participants just 6 minutes to relax once they started turning pages. So when you lose yourself in a book, you can simply forget all your daily worries. That's assuming you aren't forced to read and aren't reading any heavy texts like legal papers. Scientific studies show that reading actually makes you smarter. Your body needs movement, that means your brain needs movement as well, and reading is the best workout for your mind. It's demanding in a neurological way, plus it requires concentration and intellectual activity. Mental stimulation can slow down the process of dementia and Alzheimer's disease, keeping your brain sharp as you age. Reading is healthy, just like a morning run, so find time for it. Also, everything you read fills your head with new bits of information, and you never know when it might come in handy. The more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to tackle any challenge you'll ever face. Additionally, if you ever find yourself in dire circumstances, remember that although you might lose everything else, your job, your possessions, your money, even your health, your knowledge can never be taken from you.
Okay, so he captures a lot of what we're going to say, or at least the global kind of top ideas of what we're going to say. We'll get into some good details. I think that will be helpful for you. Why are we here then? I mean, we know we love reading. Yay! Well, we're here because we want to know more about why and how reading helps us. So when we're done today, you'll be armed with some great reasons to read and everything you could possibly need to win an argument about the value of reading. I should make a quick note here. Important note, every stat that I share here is not exclusive to fiction or nonfiction. It all helps. So people who argue, no, nonfiction is going to be better for you, that's just not true. Nonfiction is great and it does inform you about things, but fiction does the same kind of things that nonfiction will do. There's a helicopter going over my house. That's awesome. But obviously there's going to be it's not going to be the same transfer of specific actual discrete knowledge, right, that nonfiction is going to give you. So in any case, but otherwise, all the good health benefits that come from fiction and nonfiction are the same. So let's look. We'll focus on 3 areas that reading helps with. First off, we're just going to talk about overall health. A lot of mental health there, but a few other things as well. We'll talk about mental development. Okay, there's some really interesting, cool stuff there with mental development. And lastly, we'll talk about life skills. Reading absolutely does give us some life skills. Reading is a life skill, not just an academic skill. Now, I'm really used to presenting with an interactive kind of approach. And so it's just going to be me going, full steam here for this video, with some slowness, hopefully, and with some pauses and stuff here and there to let you capture your thoughts and catch your breath. But I hope that you'll be able to ask questions and make some comments, however this interaction unfolds. Okay, so let's jump right into some overall health stuff. Okay, number one, did you know that reading can actually reduce stress by over 60%? That's been found by some good scientific studies. Okay, replicated even. Reading can reduce stress by over 60%. Reading gets us out of those difficult, stressful times. I mean, we all kind of know what difficult and stressful times are, right? Interesting times. We are living in interesting times. Thanks for the curse, Terry Pratchett. But it's not only an escape. It is an escape, so to speak, but it's not only an escape from those worries. It's actually a self-care practice. It's not an avoidance tactic. It's an effort to refresh ourselves so we can come back to life's demands, those challenges, with sometimes a new outlook, but at very minimum with a more refreshed and relaxed mind. You know what it feels like to be stressed, right? You know what it feels like. It's not nice. It feels like things are, that's why we say tension, right? It feels like things are kind of stretching us in our brain, and we feel kind of like we're losing control. Reading is a great reset. It can reduce our stress by over 60%. And of course, cats probably help too. If you got a cat or a dog, physical activity is also great, but we're going to focus on reading. And cats can't read. If they could, they'd probably take over the world if they cared to, which they probably don't. Okay, next, let's point this one out. Now, there's not a lot of carefulness that's required here, but it's important to qualify a couple of things. But the truth of the matter is that scientifically, the studies on neuropsychology and behavioral psychology and mental illness like depression and anxiety, reading has been shown to reduce depression. It doesn't cure it. Like, we're not saying this cures depression. We are saying that it reduces depression to the point that it can, and even anxiety, by the way. It doesn't make depression go away, right? But if you deal with depression, if you deal with anxiety, you know that sometimes those conditions make you feel out of control, right? They make you feel like the world's out of control a little bit, and you can't really grab hold of anything. Things are slippery or too hard to grab in some other way. It is a truth that reading helps us get a little more control. Again, it helps reduce stress and helps us get a reset, but it can actually reduce depression and the symptoms and manifestations of depression and anxiety to something more manageable. And oh my gosh, literally anything that helps anxiety and depression become more manageable is worth it, man. So that's another nice, quiver in the, or arrow in the quiver of reasons to read for your health, right? Reading can actually help us manage depression and anxiety better, especially if we've grown up and reading is kind of like home. It's a safe place. Reading, it's that safe place for us, okay? So, I maybe ought to find some citations for you on this, but these are from studies I'll point out here now. Studies that I found in health magazines. There was a journal, and there was a big article on like Forbes, I think, like that, that helped me find all this information. So here we go. Let's go into another overall health area where reading can be of some assistance. Okay? Reading actually keeps the brain elastic. It decreases mental decline for the elderly by up to 32%. So, let's get into a little bit of deep brain stuff. You know that, you're probably aware that the human genome was mapped some years ago. That was a huge accomplishment, right? But that didn't solve stuff. And you probably know that we're mapping neurology, we're mapping synapses and stuff like that in the brain. But that's not actually helping us create an AI or anything like that. It's helping us gain a more complete understanding of what's going on in our brain, in that wonderful gray and pink and icky matter in there. But we're still not there, right? We still don't really fully understand everything. But what we do know is that we use some words such as synapse or, frontal lobe or anything like that, that that describes what's happening in our brain. And as we grow older, you might be aware of this, there are these synapses that kind of zip around, that do all the work that's happening. There's kind of, it's like at an electrical charge or current, right? Controlling things, controlling our thoughts. When we're doing one specific activity, this part of our brain lights up. When we're doing a different kind of activity, this other part of our brain lights up. We do something pleasurable and we get some nice dopamine hormones that say, hey, that's nice, right? Eat some more cake, or do other pleasurable yet not harmful things, like serving people and giving people hugs with consent. So we know that as we have learned in the neuropsychology field. I'm not in that field, but I love that field, and I've done plenty of reading. We believe that we know that as we grow older, things that are really flexible as a child harden, right? I mean, one of those areas is language. Speaking and comprehending verbal language is a natural thing. We are genetically prepared in order to learn a language. We're actually genetically prepared to learn a language from birth, and we may even be learning a little bit of it before birth. And what enables that, one of the things that enables that, is that our brain's very elastic. A child can be born in the United States where English is not the official language, and maybe it never should be, and then they could be transported to Japan. Like, I don't know, we may have done that. Actually, my oldest child was born in Japan, right? And he then we moved to Taiwan when he was 3, and our next one was 1. And that was fun. Well, not quite 3, near 3 and near 1. And so seeing them kind of learn languages. So the older one already spoke English pretty well, as well as a 2.5-year-old does, and he was pretty precocious with that. But he started learning Taiwanese and Chinese and Mandarin as well. And he was doing it so well, because everything's kind of elastic in the brain. It's more soft, it's more pliable, and it can switch like that better than an adult brain can. And it's because there's a hardening in these things called myelin sheaths, right, in our brain. And so that was kind of cool to see my son learning Mandarin with some speed. And it was kind of frustrating, kind of a lot frustrating for me to be like, oh, Mandarin's just bouncing off my head. It wouldn't even enter the thing. I got a few things down, something about it. I don't know, maybe I a few too many myelin sheaths that hardened for me. But reading actually keeps the brain elastic, right? It decreases mental decline for the elderly, like it says here, up to 32%. So know that can stave off dementia and Alzheimer's some. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Alzheimer's in a little bit. So this is actually particularly the case with regular exposure to new language and patterns. And that means new actual languages sometimes, but it particularly means new patterns of language for us, new presentations of language. And so may I suggest that if you want to keep your brain more elastic, read in a new genre sometimes. Cross genres, cross topics as often as you can. This actually prolongs the brain's elasticity. We should keep reading as much as we can in wide topics and genres, and we will actually stave off the hardening of the myelin sheaths a little more. Why? Well, we think that it's probably because things are moving outside of those regular paths of synapse, that they don't have the opportunity. So what hardens them is that things are always moving in the same direction through these sheaths, right? And that will harden the myelin sheath. But if it's jumping around in all different channels in our brain, those don't have as much opportunity to harden, right? So it just stays elastic and flexible, which is pretty freaking rad. And I can tell you that as a person who's read in some wide genres and topic areas and stuff like that, I've also made sure I expose myself to languages. I speak 4 of them. And I feel like I'm doing okay. Now I'm a 40-something-year-old man, and I have I forget stuff, but I don't, I remember the important things, like anniversaries and birthdays, right? So the big important takeaway here is keep reading, and read in, wide areas, wide topic areas, and wide genres too. I mean, some of us feel like some genres may be kind of not our thing. Not our thing, but maybe we should try them out anyway. Okay. So we said a lot about that. There's a little bit more to say about something very similar, so we're going to go into it. Actually, regular reading and games as we grow older makes us 2.5 times less likely, oh, that's a typo, that should be likely, to develop Alzheimer's. What? Isn't that amazing? That's kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing. Don't just read and game, guys. Tabletop gaming, VR gaming. Here we got, reading a lot. Do it all. Do all kinds of gaming. Do it with family too. Boy, I tell you. And do all the reading and jump genres. Have a lot of different genres and stuff that you do. So, at nighttime, read. If you don't have that ritual, get that ritual. Okay. So play with your great kids and your grandkids. Play with your siblings and your roommates. Read to them. Read to yourself. Read to your spouse. You can actually reduce your likelihood to develop Alzheimer's by up to 2.5 times. That's amazing. What an amazing thing. Now, obviously, there are other things that do influence our brain. There are other kind of, you could call them toggles in a way, that might get flipped by environmental reasons or for environmental reasons or genetic reasons that might make us more tend to Alzheimer's. And so we're not saying it's going to keep you from getting Alzheimer's, but we're saying it reduces your likelihood. Okay. It's a great way to take care of your brain. Like our video said, take care of the brain. We do exercise to take care of our body. We eat a little less cake sometimes to take care of our body, a little less ice cream and cookies and chocolate, maybe less soda to take care of our body. Well, let's do some things to take care of our mind. Reading is a huge part of taking care of this wonderful thing called a brain. Okay? So for me, given the unnerving ubiquity of Alzheimer's, I know I'm going to actually do my best to increase my reading and my gaming. Mostly my reading, but definitely my gaming. I've got a bunch of kids, and they all like to game. One thing that I did today to try to keep my brain a little more elastic, but also because it needed to be done, was I've been working with my kids to build a new gaming computer. We spent some lengthy time finding components for good deals, but good components. We've got most of them, and so we started building this machine, and it's quite a taxing thing on my brain because I'm pretty good with tech, but there are things I don't understand. BIOS? Anyway, so I feel like that may have helped me be a little more elastic in my noggin, and so should you. So, last thing about overall health, when it comes to reading, Donna and Tom would tell you to treat yourself, right? I can make that stop, I think. Maybe. I can't. I'll just skip. Moving on. Treat yourself. Treat your brain. Treat it well. Okay? All right. You may wonder, before we jump into this one, about overall health, well, how do I make more time to read? Well, actually, audiobooks work just as well as reading with your eyeballs. Yes, they do. Also, maybe instead of a family movie night sometime, do a family reading night, where everybody just sits around reading and maybe eating delicious things like chocolate, popcorn, I don't know, cake. I love cake. I go back to cake a lot. Cookies, maybe some savory stuff. And maybe when it's a kind of a free range thing where somebody gets to a cool thing and they're like, I got to share this. They got to share, and they can read out loud for a couple of minutes for everybody to hear. That's pretty fun. So you might say, you know what, not family movie night tonight, family reading night. Give the kids plenty of warning, of course. And this is not a parenting class. You might, instead of vegging out to that show, I don't know, The Office for the 17th time, or Justified for me for the 90th time or something, maybe read instead. So, all right. So mental development. Here is some really interesting stuff around mental development as a benefit from reading. Buckle right up. Okay. Regular reading has been shown over and over to improve focus and concentration. Yeah. So when I say over and over, I mean there are numerable studies that show that regular reading actually improves focus and concentration. Are you one of those folks who's like, oh, attention spans today suck? I am a little bit because of what my kind of other career, I write and speak, but I also do training and learning design, like in technology and in corporation level and stuff. And it's true that attention spans seem shorter. People seem less inclined to sit around and be forgiving about possibly boring training material. And that's absolutely the case when it comes to our entertainment and our information. So if you're worried about that for your kids, definitely keep them reading good stuff. And who gets to determine what's good? Kind of you do and kind of they do, right? A lot of kids who grew up saying, I don't like to read. That just means that they haven't read something that they like. So we want to do our best to not be, over the top or anything, but we gotta keep exposing our people to new things to read. Okay. That said, reading lots, of course, tends to result in stacks of books everywhere. So an important thing, like I've already said, for keeping our myelin sheath soft, our brain elastic, is to read widely. This is also the case when it comes to improving our focus and concentration. Learn to read new things. Now, I have a stack of books. I have 2 stacks of books on my TBR pile, which is right next to my bed. One's about this tall, and the other's about this tall. I made it through one by an author friend, by DJ Butler. Really good stuff, the Witchy Eye series. And so then I went down to my next one, which was an informational book called Incognito, The Secret Lives of the Brain, recommended by my friend Robinson Wells. And so my next one is actually Fallen Founder, The Life and Times, I think, of Raymond Burr by Nancy Eisenberry or something like that. So I'm trying to read widely, and I'm trying to get through things that are somewhat boring. Because in the case of that, the book I just mentioned, as in The Life and Times of Raymond Burr, or Aaron Burr, not Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr's an actor. Aaron Burr. It's not boring writing, but it's pretty dense, and so I'm having to push myself through it, and I think that's really overall quite good. And it's nice to push myself through it to find some really interesting nuggets about Aaron Burr. Sir, you all want to say sir every time I say Aaron Burr, don't you? Don't you? He is not throwing away his shot. Oh, that's a different guy. Anyway, so enough of the Hamilton stuff. The point is, read widely. And if you want to teach, nurture people that you're involved with school, with your job, with your home life, make sure to increase exposure to a wide variety of types of reading material. When it's available, let's go to the library as often as we can. And again, stacks and stacks of books. Nothing better, honestly, except for piles of cake. Okay, moving on. So another area of mental development is that studies show that regular reading actively makes a person smarter by waking up and making neural paths and even encouraging new branches to form from existing neural paths in our brain. That's right, it's mind-blowing. Literally, reading is mind-blowing, and literally reading makes us smarter. Reading can actually increase our IQ. Who cares about IQ? I certainly don't, but it can increase our overall actual brain ability and brain capacity, our intelligence quotient, right? That's freaking awesome. And then maybe you also could have a glowing blue brain. An important note about, having reading actually do this for us is that we need frequent and wide exposure to the reading. Okay? And that's what wakes up those neural paths and builds them. So have you ever noticed that you can't actually learn and retain the material and skills unless you're interested in it? Like you can probably get some recall of knowledge that you don't particularly care about, but to truly learn it, internalize it, and be able to maybe teach it back or change your behavior based on it, that only becomes when we're engaged. And the only reason we're engaged is because something has been grabbed in our brain that says, oh, curiosity, some sort of emotional engagement, some sort of social engagement, right? That is neurons. That is neural paths saying, oh, here we go. Let's do this cool thing. And if we do more and more of that, we're going to build more and more neural paths to the point where our brain's going to say, I don't have a path for that one. I'm going to go and break off a new one. It's killer, dude. So you want to get smarter? You want your kids to get smarter? You want your siblings to get smarter? Get some more reading done. It's cool. It's cool. Okay, here we go. Similar studies show that regular reading actually improves memory and retention. For the same reasons that it makes us smarter, okay? Did you know that? It improves the memory and retention. Yes, so first off, focus and concentration. It kind of one leads into the other, right? Helps our neural paths wake up and kind of get bigger and grow and branch off. And now it actually helps our memory and retention for the same reason. And memory and retention isn't just memory and holding it in there. It means recall as well, being able to recall the things that we read. It's kind of freaking awesome. So here's a nice colorful image. So reading widely. Frequency of exposure is critical to all of this stuff. Read a lot. Read stuff that you find interesting. Push through boring stuff till you find the interesting stuff, find the cool stuff. And yeah, our memory and retention will increase. Now, important note is that you do not need to do memorization exercises. Those help, like the actual, if you really want to focus and specialize in really good memory and recall, memorization exercises are killer. You can't go wrong with them, right? You find something that works for you, for like if it's rote repetition, or if it's, subliminal messaging or something like that. Maybe you record an audio thing and you listen to it while you sleep, whatever. But those memorization exercises are not necessary for an overall kind of holistic improvement in memory and retention. Okay, just wide reading, wide, frequent, regular reading and stuff that you're want to kind of learn and have fun with. So read that Dragonlance, read those Forgotten Realms. Read, Shadow and Bone. Read all those really good books, The Goose Girl. Not the Goose Girl, just Goose Girl. Read all of it. You could read my books too. Hey-o. Okay, moving on. So, mental development, another one. Buckle right up, my friends, because this is going to blow your mind. Excuse me. I'll let you read that for a second, and then I'm going to repeat it. I've made a general statement here. So longitudinal studies, those studies that follow for years, in this case children, indicate that children who are read to and who read from a very young age and even birth are more likely to win at life. Let me do a couple of clarifications. Who are read to, we all understand that. Parents reading to kids, siblings reading to their siblings, aunts and uncles, grandparents, caregivers of all kinds, teachers reading to kids from a very early age, and yet even from birth, okay? With pictures and a word or two, or just pictures and riffing on them. Those kids gain some skills that I'm going to quantify or detail a little bit here, but it just sets them up for more success. Okay, and I'll show you what some of those skills are, some of the skills and attributes that they gain from this. And as for reading from a very young age, that is a hard input or output to control, right? I want my kid to be reading at 3. Well, do you really? Because that might not be actually developmentally intelligent. Maybe we should let our children learn to read at their own pace, giving them the opportunity. But the point is to give them the opportunity and the access to level appropriate things like board books for little kids and tiny little chapter books for the bigger kids and so on and so on and so on, right? The primers and stuff like that, like Dr. Seuss, where they can do minimal pairs like hop and pop and top and drop, That's right, linguistics. I like that stuff. So they just, kids who get all this exposure, they just have more chance at succeeding in very many areas of life. Okay, so these kids are reading. Let's talk about a couple specific things. Children who experience what I've just described, they are better in every aspect of education. Not just reading and verbal, but in math and in composition and in sciences. Okay? Because things are more elastic in the brain. It's pretty awesome. They're certainly exposed to much more vocabulary, meaning that their comprehension of high-level things is much better. They're able to write in a more educated way, in a way that pleases the academic world that they're writing in. There's all kinds of good reasons to have a broader vocabulary, not the least of which being you can use cool, imaginative words that rock people's minds or in worlds. Next, they can understand rationality and logic, such as cause and effect, better. Okay? Something about the reading, something about the characters or the images, something about learning how things work. It helps the kids learn what actually is meant by cause and effect. What cause leads to what effect. It's really interesting. And other logical issues as well. The more critical thinking and stuff like that is enabled because of this, because of reading. And the studies have actually found that students and kids who go through these things, who are able to have exposure to reading, being read to and reading on their own and manipulating language on their own, they actually end up with better judgment. That's pretty cool. Actual better judgment. A really important thing is this. So you may know kids who just love like graphic novels only. And you might think graphic novels are not that great. Number one, they are great, actually. Graphic novels have been shown to be a fantastic entree into the reading world. And graphic novels have been shown to be a really solid gateway to good reading experiences and good reading abilities for people who are a little less interested, maybe reluctant readers, okay? So that's okay. So I want to just make sure you understand. You can rest easy with graphic novels. I would, of course, with all books, graphic novels and comics and anything, manga. If you've got content concerns of your own because of who you are and your own principles and expectations for your life and your family, make sure you understand what's in those things, okay? Because the visual, the images and stuff can be more powerful and they're more indelible in many ways. So, but don't worry about graphic novels as being a lower level kind of reading, because it's just not. It's a great entree. It's a great access point for a lot of reluctant readers or readers who just don't feel like they have the time to jump into a big meaty piece of literature. As a teacher of reading and of literacy and composition, I used to have a problem with these kind of primers or these language controlled books or these or even graphic novels, because I thought, they're not going to read the real ones. That's just not true. If somebody loves that amazing graphic novel of Anne Frank's diary, or the Diary of Anne Frank, they're actually much more likely to go pick up the Diary of Anne Frank sometime when they're feeling more amenable to that kind of time commitment. Same for Last of the Mohicans or other really important books. To Kill a Mockingbird. Is there a graphic novel of To Kill a Mockingbird? I don't know that I've seen that. Let me know in comments or if you know one. So that'd be great. So please understand that you can be fully invested in your kids' reading and in your own reading, and you can control for content if you have content issues. But graphic novels are great. Comics are great. All books are great. Chapter books. Novels are great, whatever your kid feels like they're interested in doing or you feel interested in doing, you can read it without shame, without guilt. You have my permission. That's right. Jared Garrett, non-PhD. Jared Garrett, what am I? MA. Jared Garrett, MA. Published author, linguist, world-traveling speaker and teacher and inspiring motivator and all that stuff. I say it's okay. All right? Read whatever. Okay, so lastly, kids these days, am I right? Okay, so you might... You could say that reading is brain science. Okay. Hopefully you get the reference. Oh my gosh. I hope you get the reference, or I've just embarrassed myself. Last, we just have a couple more things to mention about life skills. Life skills. Reading gives us courage and daring. Of course it does. Think about that, right? Studies have shown that reading about characters and real people doing adventurous, challenging, sometimes even scary things can help us do the same kinds of things in our lives. Climbing a mountain, asking for that raise, saying you'll do a solo video presentation on the benefits of reading. Wait, that's me. And many other things, right? We see it. We say, oh, I identify with this person. This person's almost a real person for me because it's a character in a book. Or I read about a person like in Unbreakable. Holy flip, that book's amazing, right? This person overcame so much and, so many different things, and they ended up having a really impressive life. I can surely do this hard thing. I bet I can do it. Or at least I'm willing to give it a try, and I'm willing to fail and maybe try again if I fail. So read about someone asking for a raise and getting it. Then you know what to do, right? So reading fiction and nonfiction about characters going through deep challenges and people doing real things. Muhammad Ali, Elizabeth Smart's amazing autobiography. My Story. Michelle Obama's got a great one. Tara Westover's Education. All these amazing books, these true ones. And then, these great, amazing books that change your life. So like Bridge to Terabithia for me. Something about that, it just blew my mind. It taught me that I could overcome grief. I went through a lot of grief when I was a kid. Lost a lot of important people and things. That taught me how to deal with my grief. It told me I could, and that's pretty cool. So another area of life skills is that reading actually helps us learn empathy. It in fact, actually helps us improve our relationships in real life. These are studies have shown this stuff. So important thing here is that identifying with characters and real people in books helps us in every way. It helps us see people for who they are. Empathize. It helps us empathize because we can put ourselves in the shoes of these other folks. We see people as real people. We've seen imaginary characters as real people. We love them. We don't want them to get hurt. Harry Dresden, right? We don't want him to get hurt, but he gets hurt all the time, Harry. Come on, Harry. Anyway, we see them as real people with their own stories in these nonfiction books. And that helps us see real people around us as real people in their own real stories where they're the main character. And that's a very important skill to have in life, okay? And as we read about heroes, real and not, We identify key attributes that we just love, and we want to be like that. I want to be like Bruenor Battlehammer, man, from the Icewind Dale trilogy. Ooh, boy, I do. The way he parented, the way he was willing to give so much for his kids, his adopted kids, right? I want to also, make an amazing Warhammer called Aegis Fang, but, that's just me. And remember that repeated exposure to these characters going through hard things and real people going through hard things in nonfiction, it actually helps us be more determined to do better and to improve our own lives. So, yes, we tend to emulate attributes we see and admire, even when we see those in books. All right? It's just true. And that brings us full circle to the story I told, right? I grew up reading all these amazing books that blew my mind. I read comic books about Peter Parker becoming Spider-Man and sacrificing so much. I wanted to be like him. I mean, I wouldn't mind being Spider-Man, although I'm kind of nervous around spiders. I don't want them jumping at me. But sorry for the arachnophobes. I'm sorry. Am I, though? Okay. I wanted to, I could see myself in his struggles and his day-to-day difficulties and in his desire to be a hero with his great powers that he's been blessed with and how hard it could be for him. I wanted to live my own life of, being able to sacrifice for my true love that I read about in all kinds of great books. There's a great book called Captain Corelli's Mandolin. The movie's not good. It's beautiful about love and sacrifice and stuff like that. Those books changed my life. They made me who I wanted to be. They made me see I could be who I wanted to be. And now I'm pretty close. I'm a little overweight, and I've got less hair, hence the hat. But I write books, and I have a great family. And you can look around and you can see some neat successes in your life, and I hope you can trace them back to reading experiences that you've done in your own life. But now you've been armed with really interesting tools that you can use for your own education, for your education of the people you have stewardship for. And if you want to just, shake your fist at somebody who says reading's a waste of time, now you have all these things that you can toss at them, all these arrows you can shoot at them, okay? So, really important. Reading makes us and life better. Okay? Thank you very much for tuning in to this one-way presentation. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope you've gained a lot from it. This is me. If you want to keep in touch or get in touch, you can reach out to me on all of these, Twitter or Instagram or email, or just on Facebook. That's my Facebook author page. I don't have a ton of presence on. I mean, I'm on the social media probably more than I should be, but I'm not as much as maybe I used to be. I just find that I have more books than I need to write and more work I need to do, so I don't. And this is a lineup of my books. I've got a couple more coming out this year as well. Actually, Finding Home comes out this year. I'm delighted that I could be here with you. I hope that this has been good for you. Thanks so much for tuning in, and all I can say is keep reading, guys. Find books that you love and read them. Thanks for tuning in.
Okay, our first question is from Renee, and it is, what is your favorite genre to read in, and how do you recommend getting back into reading if academics have taken away your time and ability to read for fun?
Both of those are interesting and challenging questions. My favorite genre to read, just kind of for pure entertainment, is going to be sword and sorcery, fantasy usually, and I really like action-packed stories. It's what I write as well, most of the time, not all the time. So sword and sorcery, a lot like D&D, Forgotten Realm stuff, like by R.A. Salvatore, Mercedes Lackey as well, one of my favorite writers. So fantasy mostly, but I have a new favorite epic science fiction writer named Christopher Rocchio. Huge epic science fiction, so I recommend that. As for getting back into reading, after academics or even while academics is taking your time to read away, I cannot stress this enough. If you love reading, you're going to want to do everything it takes to get back into reading. I don't know if I have specific techniques except for just find something that really excites the heck out of you to read. My last year of undergraduate experience, I had a heavy load. Usually I took about 16 to 17 credits. And we had a couple of kids, and both my wife and I we were both at school, and we were both also working. And so we were very busy, but I found myself kind of restless in a way. I don't know if you felt yourself just feeling like you got to get up and do something. I felt like something in my brain was doing that. And maybe that's what you're experiencing. And so I went through a library and said, are there books here I haven't read? And you know what I found? I found the Dresden Files. I think the first one. And I was like, this looks interesting, urban fantasy. And I read the first few pages. I'm like, I think I could get excited about this one. So I brought it home and I read it, and it took me a while to really be able to put time into it. But then when I could put time into it, like one night I was able to stay up for an extra half an hour. I just fell in love with it. And so I was looking for time to read that. And so I think I found that once I got back into that kind of groove of being excited about what I'm reading, that basically fulfilled that goal of reading more. I actually ended up reading all of the Redwall series by Brian Jakes in my final semester and a half at BYU, and I got a 4.0 both semesters. So I have strong beliefs about what reading does for the elasticity of our brain, which is one of the reasons I was excited to do this presentation. So hopefully that helps. Just long story short, find something that looks really cool that you really want to read, and then steal some time. Your brain will absolutely thank you and do good things for you.
Okay, so extending that idea, how do you transition into reading new genres when you're trying to expand your reading library?
Really a very similar answer. And understand that I am a scrub sitting in an office surrounded by, posters of geeky things, and I write books. And, what are my credentials? My credentials are that I have been a learning psychologist student and an instructor and trainer and everything for 20 plus years now. So I do speak from some experience, but your mileage is going to vary. I would suggest, though, that number one, you might ask trusted friends for recommendations in their genres that might be different from your typical genre. Ask for them for what's the best thing, or what's one of your favorites. And if you trust their tastes, then you should be able to feel confident to give that thing a go. If you have no friends, like me, I have a couple friends. Or if you just want to try it on your own, go to the library. Again, it's free. You're paying for it it's not free. You pay for it with your taxes, but it's there. It's paid for already. Go to the library and see if one of those books catches your eye. It's going to take a half an hour to an hour to kind of walk through the fantasy section, because there's some of the bigger sections. And one funny, weird one is that you might try, if you haven't read middle grade, especially middle grade fantasy, you might try that, because middle grade fantasy is really accessible and usually really fun and a really quick read. And so you might try that. So recommendations, walk through the library, and all else fails, grab some middle grade fantasy, because it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Thank you. Chase asks, if you don't like the genre or book that you're reading, but want to expand your knowledge anyway, do you still get benefits from reading the thing you don't like?
Oh boy. Don't tell your professor what I'm about to say. So yes, but also no, because both those answers absolutely apply. Some people don't really like school, right? We don't necessarily, and I'm saying we because I really mean me. We don't necessarily really like the academics, the deep detail into such as, topics like physics were never really interesting to me. It was never presented in a way that really engaged me. I was never particularly curious about biology as well, and a couple of other subjects. Statistics were just, and algebra, no, thank you. But when I was having to read kind of dense expository texts about physics or biology, those principles and the knowledge that we have about those things, it did definitely give me some benefit in that it does expand some of those neural paths in our brain, but it's not going to be anywhere near as strong, and it's not going to stick. I truly do not remember the actual details and specific knowledge that I gained from physics or biology and stuff, except for I understand that, gravity exists. So there's going to be some at least temporary benefit and some expansion of neural pathway, but it's probably not going to stick around. And I say that, take that with a grain of salt. Your brain wants to be engaged. True learning will really happen only when we're truly engaged, intellectually or emotionally or socially. And so while we are required by life and life circumstances to often learn things or read things that were not necessarily our choice, if we can find some things that do fire our curiosity in those areas, we are going to get more benefit from those things. But yeah, you're not going to probably get the same benefit as, from stuff that you're not really interested in as you would from stuff you really are interested in. So try to mix it up so that you continue to get those cool benefits out there. I hope that helps a little bit. Just try to find what really does catch your interest, and that'll help a lot.
So forcing yourself provides a diminishing return.
Yeah. So instead of forcing yourself, try to kind of dig into something that's maybe extra interesting that you find. For one example, sciences are just, I like them and I'm interested in them sort of, but I took, what was it? Physical science or something like that at BYU. It was a required general class or something, whatever it's called. And then one of the things that it was all very dull to me, except for I thought DNA was really interesting. And so I read a lot more about DNA and RNA and all that stuff. And so I remember a little bit more about that and the images I learned. And because of that, I do remember more because I actually was interested. But all the rest of the stuff I just wasn't very interested in. So, your mileage is going to vary. We want to do our best to stay as engaged as we can, though. We don't want life and learning to be drudgery.
Wonderful. Edge Dancer 07 would like to know, what types of topics do people commonly not know would be fun to read about?
Haha. So you could ask that to anybody and they're going to give you some cool ideas. These are just Jared's ideas. I think a lot of people overlook biographies, especially autobiographies. I've read some neat, crazy ones from people I was either interested in or maybe not even interested in. In one case, I read Elizabeth Smart's My Story. In that, I don't want to have that in my brain because it's so hard to kind of believe and see and know that she went through all that stuff. But it was a fascinating look, and her writing was very crisp and very clean, no frills. It was very, very enlightening to me. I really recommend biographies, autobiographies, as well as historical stuff like by David McCullough. I know he's a big name, but there's a lot of really good historical type stuff out there. Don't overlook those. We like to hear stories and read stories about other people. So that's one. And another one, there are a lot of genre, we've got the big genres, fantasy and science fiction and stuff, but there are a lot of smaller kind of niches inside of fantasy and science fiction and things like that. And there's a lot of older stuff that a lot of people are forgetting or is out there. If I were you, I'd go look for some of that older stuff. I know some of those authors had some views that are kind of ridiculous and, as we understand, for sure, wrong. But Edgar Rice Burroughs is killer, and Robert E. Howard is pretty rad, and other folks like that are really great. And may I recommend you read all the Tarzan books and all the Hardy Boy books because they're awesome. Also, I write very niche stories, so try mine.
A good recommendation.
Absolutely.
Okay, Kathy H. is curious to know, is part of the benefit of this additional reading to understand things like consequences and the benefits of trying again?
Yeah, as the presentation kind of covers a little bit of this, in that, we do studies have shown that life skills are gained by reading the fiction and the nonfiction. And absolutely, when you understand cause and effect and the consequences occur when choices are made, and those consequences can't be dodged necessarily. And sometimes this is a really neat thing when somebody does try to dodge the consequences of their action, that in a good story, it comes around and bites them. I think J. Scott Savage says often, bad choices make good stories. So a bad choice to tell a lie is eventually going to have a consequence that cannot be avoided. So yeah, absolutely. Fiction helps us understand consequence, cause and effect. Often we also can, like I said in the presentation, we can see ourselves in other people's shoes. We gain much more empathy. Studies have shown that, man, people who read prolifically, fiction and nonfiction, are far more empathetic than the people who don't. And you may even have seen that in your own life. So yeah, hopefully that helps a little bit.
Okay, and that concludes the questions that we've received from the audience. Are there any concluding remarks you'd like to make?
No, I appreciate your patience through the video. It's funny to know that a video is playing while I'm sitting here waiting for it to be done. And I hope that you guys do continue to push hard on the reading front. Don't give up. Reading is powerful. And I hope you find some good books, mine included, but I've got lots of recommendations. You can find me on the Discord server for all the attendees. I can answer questions. And you can find me on social media like I showed in the slides as well. Thanks for tuning in, guys.